I just think that's just such a great example of how individually and collectively they created this social contract when they set this goal to change the behavior, to change their culture in the department related to showing up for a shift.
Welcome to Culture Change RX, the podcast for healthcare professionals that are committed to creating a thriving workplace culture, improving the experiences of employees and patients, and ultimately unlocking their organization's next level of potential. I'm Sue Tetzloff, your host and co-founder of Capstone Leadership Solutions. Join me and my insightful guests each week as we share actionable insights for navigating the crucial people side of the business of healthcare. Subscribe now for a weekly dose of Culture Change RX. Now let's dive into this week's conversation where culture change takes center stage. Welcome to this episode of Culture Change RX. This is one of those short solo episodes that we call Culture Bytes. This is a solo episode, and today I'm going to be following up on the topic that we talked about last week in a guest interview with Kevin Strandberg about how a goal cycle in an organization, setting organization-wide goals, cascading those down to the department level, having this cadence of activity that is, this is how we do it around here. This is how we set goals. This is how we work to achieve goals. This is how we align goals. This is how we come together, how they actually do positively impact organizational culture. And so today I wanted to follow that up with a short story about how having a goal actually helped a department change its culture and change the behaviors of the people that work within that department. So many years ago, when I was a chief operating officer of a hospital, we had this goal cycle that we set up, and every year we had this process for setting and working towards achieving our goals. And during that process, I had an environmental services leader, Heather, that worked for me. And she led the department in which they did all of the housekeeping. They had all the housekeeping responsibilities for all of our campuses of our community hospital. And when they were getting ready to set goals in this particular year, Heather was a brand new leader. She hadn't done it before, so she asked if I would assist her with that. And of course, as her boss, happy to do that, happy to teach her this process of leading her team to set their annual goals. And so we gathered all of her people together. We prepared this meeting, and how we started the meeting was we talked about the organizational goals that had been set that year. Every year, our organization set 3 to 8 goals that were our top level goals for the year that were going to be aligned with our strategic plan. And then now it was the process where individual departments had to select 1 to 3 goals that aligned with one or more of those top goals for the organization. So how could each individual department contribute? And if each individual department contributes, then we have that aligned action, and there's a higher likelihood that the organization will meet its goal. And so this was a process that we had been doing for years, but this is Heather's first time. So we started our meeting with sharing the organization goals. Then we moved into sharing metrics about the performance of the housekeeping department in particular. So what was their financial report? What did that look like? How was it trending? What was patient satisfaction on the inpatient and outpatient with cleanliness? What was the scores of their employee engagement survey this past year, et cetera? So we're sharing all of this information with the team. So they know what the goals are for the organization. They know what their metrics and trends are for their department. And so then we just opened it up to an open-ended question that said, what can we do? What's 1, 2, or 3 goals we should set next year for us to contribute to the organization's success? And I remember this so specifically that in the back of the room, in this gathering of housekeepers, there was Maggie. I remember Maggie raising her hand in the back of the room, and she said, Heather and Sue, I think we need a goal to decrease absenteeism. And Heather and I kind of looked at each other because we hadn't talked anything about any data or information about absenteeism in the department. And so I just asked
Maggie the question. I said, Maggie, why do you think the department needs a goal this next year to decrease absenteeism? And she said, I noticed that our teamwork score was really low on the employee engagement survey. And it doesn't feel much like a team when people don't show up for their shifts and they leave you short. And she goes, I'm pretty sure that that's one of the reasons that that is low. And you showed us on the financial report that our overtime numbers are really high and getting higher. And if people don't show up for their shifts and we have to call somebody else in, it's often at overtime if we can get anyone to come in and fill those shifts. So our overtime is probably high too. And you showed us that our turnover rate is high, that people are leaving the department and our jobs are always, open and getting filled and open and getting filled. And I really think that that's because, people don't want to stay on a team where people don't show up for work. And so they move on. And she said, and you showed us that our cleanliness scores, that patients are saying that they're not satisfied with the cleanliness of the buildings. And it's really hard to have a clean building if people aren't showing up to work their shifts. So we said, I think you're really onto something, Maggie. And so we said, how about we do this? How about we look at those numbers? Because everyone in the room was, nodding their head like Maggie was onto something, not just Heather and I, as the leaders of the department. And so we said, what if we do this? What if we run those numbers and look to see what those actual numbers are? And then we could work to set a measurable goal for that. So we graphed out a whole year worth of data and found out there was 246 absences in the last year. And they said, we want to set a goal to reduce that to 150 or less in the next year. And that's exactly the goal they set for their department. And so they started to work on their action plan for how they were going to achieve this. Well, sometimes we think, like what is going to be on an action plan for something like reducing absenteeism, right? It's not like you can create a new process. It's not like you can buy new equipment or technology. It's really about behavior change. And so they decided they wanted to do just a few things to start with. And the first thing they decided to do was they wanted to recognize the people that showed up for work. So they created this board outside of their office that just was a recognition board. And every pay period, if somebody had perfect attendance for a pay period of 2 weeks, their name went up on this recognition board. And then every month at their staff meeting, they would recognize those people. And then once a quarter, they would take all of those names. So if you had perfect attendance for 3 pay periods in this last quarter, your name would go into the drawing 3 times. And they had a $25 Visa gift card as a gift once a quarter over the 4 quarters of the year. And so they wanted to recognize those people that were showing up for their shifts and give that recognition. And then they also wanted to track it. They thought, we weren't obviously tracking it before because we didn't even know the number when we started talking about this problem. So they kept that graph that was for the last year outside the door. And then they put a new graph underneath it to just track the attendance. So every pay period, somebody in the department was responsible for updating that graph and showing was absenteeism going up or down or, all over the place. So what was it? They were going to start watching. And so that's all they started with was those 2 things. And then they started to notice that as that recognition was going up, absenteeism was going down. So they were monitoring it and they were recognizing positive behavior. And then around summertime, we started to notice that absenteeism was going up again. And it was summertime, nice weather, people want to be outside. And so at their staff meeting, they said, what are we going to do about this? And they decided to create a challenge. And that challenge was if we could have a whole pay period with perfect attendance by everyone would get a $5 gift certificate to the Dairy Queen, which was a sign that it was summer in Sault Ste. Marie. And so they set that goal to like a little mini challenge. And that very next pay period of 2 weeks, they had 100% perfect attendance. And they had never saw that happen in all the tracking that they've been doing last year or this year. So they were really excited about accomplishing that. So it's really interesting how when they set this goal, they really created this social contract with each other that they were going to work together to achieve things. And then when they set this mini goal, they did the same thing too, right? This challenge. And they created this social contract that we're going to all do this. You didn't want to be the one that didn't do this, right? That was the one that didn't show up for your shift when you had this little challenge for the whole team. And I remember thinking, I don't know if anyone actually used their Dairy Queen certificates, because I remember seeing Wanda. She was working down in the emergency department, cleaning the emergency department one day. And I saw her going up to the emergency room doctor and pulling that $5 Dairy Queen certificate out of her pocket, saying, look what we got. We had a whole pay period of perfect attendance. We have a goal this year to decrease our absenteeism. And we had a whole pay period of perfect attendance. And we got these Dairy Queen certificates. And I saw her put it back in her pocket and then go to one of the ER nurses and do the same thing. And then go to the clerk in the ER and do the same thing. So they were so proud of coming together to achieve this challenge together. And by the end of the year, it was so great. I went down to their department and I was looking at their goal board. And I saw that they, with one pay period left to go, their goal was 150 absences and they were at 146. And I remember thinking, wow, they're really going to meet their goal this year. I really thought that 40% decrease from 246 absences to 150 was going to be really a difficult goal for them to achieve. And here they were on the cusp of the end of the year, and it looked like they were going to achieve their goal. And I just think that's just such a great example of how individually and collectively they created this social contract when they set this goal to change the behavior, to change their culture in the department related to showing up for a shift. If you're scheduled, you show up. And just like Maggie said, absenteeism went down, but also patient satisfaction with cleanliness went up. Overtime went down, their teamwork score went up, and even the infection rate in the hospital was cut in half. And they took credit for that too. So it's amazing how setting one goal, the leader didn't set it right. Now, if the leader would have set that goal for the department, you could imagine if it was done to them versus with them, it may not have created that social contract. So one of the pointers about creating goals that actually unite people, create a social contract where behavior and culture in the department can change, is that we do it with them, not to them, that they're the actual ones. Like the Maggie raising her hand and her team members agreeing, saying, yes, this is our unique opportunity to make a difference in our department. And when we do this, and when we make this difference in this one way, multiple things will get better. And so I love this story. Then the next year, they said that wasn't good enough. And the rest of the story is they got down to 74 absences. And yes, turnover kept going down. Patient satisfaction with cleanliness kept going up. Overtime kept going down, their teamwork score kept going up, those kind of things. So many improvements kept happening as they kept working to change their culture in this way, that we're a team that shows up for our shifts. And that is a great example of behavior and culture change in a team and how goals can make that happen.
Thanks for tuning in to Culture Change RX. If you found value in today's episode and you are a believer in fostering change in healthcare, join us in making a difference. Follow, rate, and review our podcast on your favorite platform. Share it with colleagues and your network. Together, we can make a lasting impact. Until next week, keep inspiring positive change.